Surprisingly, when I was found by my father, I pointed to the young Liu Ryan and said, "She is the one who is your daughter." Ryan Liu had already become the daughter of the Minister of Industry's daughter, while I was left behind in the Goodwill Hall as an orphan daughter. In my last life, Ryan Liu and I were both recognized, but I was cut open for my heart after returning to the house. Ryan Liu stood beside me and said, "Sister, if you don't die, it will be me who dies." I then realized that Pei Shangshu's son was sick and needed the heart blood of an immediate family member. Opening my eyes again, I went back to the moment when Pei Shangshu came to the Good Hall to find me. The man in front of me was dressed in brocade. Although he was middle-aged, he was still handsome and elegant, revealing an air of refinement. The master of the Goodwill Hall pointed at him and said, "This is the Minister of Public Works, Mr. Pei, why don't you show your courtesy?" Sister Baba came up and performed a not-so-standardized salute and said, "Greetings, Your Excellency." I, on the other hand, gave a nonchalant salute and turned around to leave. The hall master, however, called out to me and said, "Lord Pei is here to find his own daughter, and all of us from the Goodwill Hall must attend." My sister's eyes were glowing, and she turned back to give me a warning glance, taking advantage of the tumultuous chatter to whisper, "Sister, even though we're blood sisters, no one knows it. So don't even think about trying to snatch my father's favor with me. Yes, we all know who we are." My mother was a famous prostitute in Suzhou, and when Pei Jian was still a scholar, he fell in love with my mother. My mother took out her ransom savings to pay for his exams and became pregnant with his child. But Pei Jian married the Prime Minister's daughter and left my mother behind. My mother, who was far away in Suzhou, was heartbroken when she heard the news, but managed to hold on to her body to give birth to us and raise us until we were 6 years old. In order to raise us, she stopped picking out customers and eventually died of venereal disease. I fled the greenhouse with my sister and starved in front of the Goodwill Hall and was taken in by the hall master. After a decade, Pei Jian finally remembered us. Looking at my sister with a threatening face, I attached my ear and said, "Don't worry, you are my favorite sister. I will let you have all the good things." 10 years of hard work, I took my sister and raised her, but gave her a selfish and self-interested nature, causing me to lose my life. I have grudges and hatred in my heart, but I don't show half of it. Sister, and watch me help you. I hooked up the corners of my mouth and said with a smile, "Ryan, don't you always say that your father is a big official?" I deliberately raised my volume and said. My sister's body shook and looked at me in surprise. The sound quickly attracted Pei Jian's attention, and he looked Liu Ryan up and down before looking at me again. I tilted my head. My years of hard work had left me with dark skin, very different from the Liu Ryan I had taken care of so well that I wasn't at all afraid of being recognized. "Come here, let me see." Pei Jian snapped, pointing to Ryan Liu. Her sister obediently walked up and lifted her clear little face. Pei Jian said with a smile on his face, "Yes, there is an 8-point resemblance to Liu Ye. Liu Ye is our mother. What is your name?" he asked in a warm voice, just like a loving father said. Liu Ryan's eyelashes fluttered and she softly said, "My name is Liu Ryan. The surname is also correct." Pei Jian asked again, "Can there be a token?" Ryan Liu looked embarrassed and shook her head. I walked up and said, "Ryan, have you forgotten? At that time, you were carrying a jade pendant, saying that it was a token of love from your parents." I took the jade pendant out and said, "At that time, you were young and afraid of losing it, so you gave it to me for safekeeping," I said as I walked forward and presented the jade pendant to Pei Jian. Pei Jian took the jade pendant and looked at it again and again, laughed out loud and said, "That's right, it's exactly what I gave to Summer back then." "Ryan Liu, are you willing to return to Pei Mansion with me?" Ryan Liu's eyes brightened as she nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes." I looked at the excited father-daughter duo and smiled in my heart. In my last life, I ignored Ryan Liu's threats, pointed out my identity, and returned to the Shangshu mansion with Ryan Liu. Who knew that it turned out that Pei Jian's son was sick, and the doctor said that the only way to cure the disease was to use the heart blood of a blood relative. Mrs. Pei reminded said, "When you were outside that little bitch but pregnant, maybe that bitch is still alive." Pei Jian then remembered us and hurriedly came to find. When he arrived in Suzhou, but heard that Liu Ye died 10 years ago, he strangled, not for Liu Ye, but for his own son. He also asked around and learned that Liu Ye did give birth to a child, but the child had long since disappeared. He then put his hope in these Goodwill Halls to see if he could find news of us. This Goodwill Hall is the last one in Suzhou. In my last life, I overheard the truth and told Ryan Liu what I knew and wanted to escape with her, but she backhandedly betrayed me and told Mrs. Pei. "Sister doesn't love my brother at all. If it were me, I would rather offer my heart's blood to my brother." She said this, "But I love my younger brother so much, in case I die and my younger brother still needs to be cured, my sister is definitely not willing." She knit her brows tightly and said in what seemed to be a very difficult manner. Hearing this, Mrs. Pei snapped, "Then take her heart's blood. To be able to die for my Linner is a blessing for this bitch." I was locked in my room by my sister and had no way to ask for help. The day I was vivisected, my sister whispered in my ear, "Sister, if you don't die, it will be me who dies." Before she breathed her last, she still had a smile on her face and said, "In the future, my father will only have one son and one daughter, and I will finally be able to enjoy my father's favor alone." In this life, I fulfilled her dream in advance and told her to enjoy Pei Jian's favor alone. My sister is flaunting her arms. Tomorrow morning, Pei's carriage will come to the Good Hall to pick her up, and as she sits on the edge of the bed, swaying and looking sprightly and lovely, her mouth says, "Sister, you can disguise yourself as a maid and go with me to the mansion, and maybe father will recognize you one day." She tested me. I shook my head and said, "I just want to stay in the Good Hall, that kind of big family. There must be a lot of rules. I can't stand it." She smiled proudly and said, "Sister, the same mother was born. How come you don't look like both your parents?" Ryan Liu is indeed more like her mother, handsome and charming. My eyebrows and eyes are also similar, but it is a pity that in the past 10 years I have been exposed to the sun and the wind, and I have worked excessively, and I look dark and coarse. So I really don't look like a young lady. Good Hall is meant to do work. I feel sorry for my sister, so I did all the work for her. No sister, good life, born like a flower, I said sincerely. If I didn't look like this, I'm afraid that I would have been questioned a few times yesterday, and it wouldn't necessarily have been the one who died. Liu Ryan covered her mouth and said, "This is true, sister, don't worry. As long as I am developed, on the basis of your previous love for me, I will certainly not forget you." I faced lovingly, with a smile on my face, said, "Sister, as long as you live well, more important than anything else. Shangshu house this dragon pool and tiger's den, you first break through for me." She did not believe it, just like she did not believe my love for her in the previous 10 years. Selfish people will always feel that others must hold some purpose. "If you dare to return to the Pei mansion, I will skin you," she said as she warned me again. "Don't worry, sister, I just want to stay in the Goodness Hall and repay the Hall Master for raising me." I emphasized that I have absolutely no second thoughts, and only then did my sister feel relieved to leave. Looking at her slender waist, as well as her incipient breasts, I was amused in my heart. The 28 years of my life came to an abrupt end. However, in the course of 10 months, I was cleaning up in the Good Hall when the Hall Master suddenly walked over quickly, with grief on his face.